Howdy folks! Today I'm going to walk you through the process for deploying game cameras to help out on the Southern Interior Mule Deer project. And first off, thanks for your interest in the project. This is very much a collaborative team effort, and without the help of many hardworking folks like yourself, this work just would not be possible. And so this video is going to have two distinct parts. First, I'm just going to give a rundown of important pre-departure steps, and then after that I'll take an extended walk through the actual camera deployment procedures. Before you head off into the back 40, there's a couple of steps you should take to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible for you out there. So first off, double check that you've got all your gear ready to go with full battery life in your GPS and phone or digital camera. And I recommend taking a good look at your target coordinates in Google Earth and familiarizing yourself with your access options and seeing what the terrain is like. I'd also take some time to familiarize yourself with your GPS and how to select various coordinate formats. And if your GPS is not set to the correct coordinate format, which is decimal degrees, that's one single number followed by several decimal points, and this is also called just degrees. If you don't have that setting on, then you're potentially setting yourself up to go to the wrong location. You can't enter a decimal degree coordinate into degrees, minute, second format and end up at the same spot. So it's really important that you make sure you adjust this setting. Also, before you head out, we're asking that you share your travel plan for the day with your own personal safety contact, as well as your regional rep and myself. And the key details for signing out can be found on the top section of your field data sheet, and those live inside the camera kits. And essentially we're just trying to keep track of where you're planning on going, what time you expect to be home, how we can get hold of you, who your emergency contact is, and just the basic necessities for keeping track of somebody who's heading out into potentially remote areas. Okay, so I'm pretty excited. I just got out in the field and I parked and I'm ready to start hiking into my camera site. But there's some important things I need to remember before just running into the woods. I'm going to take a GPS waypoint of my parking location. This gives me a return home point that I will be able to find my way out at the end of the day, even if I end up doing a big, long, convoluted hike. I know exactly how to get to my vehicle, even when I'm all tired. So that's very important. The other thing is, I need to grab my gear. So of course, you've already packed all your stuff. You have it all nicely ready to go. You're gonna grab your backpack, but you're also gonna remember to grab your reference post. If you're feeling light, you might have forgotten this. Okay, so I took my GPS waypoint of my vehicle where I parked and I started hiking towards my coordinates, and now I've arrived. But now that I'm here at my coordinates, what exactly should I do? From this point, I have a 50-meter radius in all directions where I'm going to begin searching to find the right mix of features for a proper camera setup. And for us, proper means staying within 50 meters of your coordinates, finding a trail, a game trail that has some evidence of use, either tracks or scat, and best case scenario, you can find a confluence of trails where multiple trails meet, and if you set the camera up there, you're more likely to get detections from either trail. And additionally, we want to find a mounting platform, like a tree, that is 4 to 6 meters back from the actual trail. And we don't want to be setting up a camera right at the trail, because if something walks by, you'll just see a blur. So it needs to be set back a ways, 4 to 6 meters back, within 50 meters of our GPS location. We also want the camera ideally to be facing a primary northerly bearing. South is okay, but avoid having the camera placed so it has to face east or west looking across the trail, because we'll get some issues with sunlight obscuring our photos at different times of the day. So you want to find a north or south facing angle across, perpendicular, across a trail within 50 meters and 4 to 6 meters back from the trail. Well, I looked around within my 50-meter radius and I couldn't find anything. So what should I do? I shouldn't just compromise and set it up, my camera, at any spot that I can find. Each camera location will be accompanied with 3 sets of coordinates. So if you cannot find a good camera setup location at the first, within 50 meters of your first coordinates, there'll be 2 sets of alternate coordinates. And so now, because this spot's no good, I will go to my secondary set of coordinates, and they're labeled in order, and it's important that we follow the order instead of choosing which coordinates seem best for us. I'm going to bump to the next set of coordinates and see if I can find a good camera mounting location within 50 meters of those coordinates. Okay, so we've actually found a good platform to mount our camera to that is 4.5 meters back from this trail that runs across this area down into the shrubs over there. And I saw some deer pellets on there, some tracks, and I can see that there's been some browsing in this area. So all signs of deer and ungulate activity. So that is a check. Another check for this site is I took a look at my compass, and from the tree that you're looking at now, that's almost a dead north look across this trail, which, as I said, runs perpendicular this way. So that bearing is great. The distance back is good. And I'm happy with this site. There's no major obstructions clearing the future camera location. There's no big trees in the way or anything. And I can deal with some of these small shrubs here in a moment when I walk us through site preparation. So I'm going to go ahead and take a GPS waypoint of this location, and I'm going to record that in my notes later. So yeah, this site ticks all the boxes. Last thing is it's within 20 meters of my target coordinates. The second set that I checked out for this site, they were just 20 meters off over that way, so I'm within the 50-meter tolerance, and that's really important too. Okay, and just one quick thing. If you look around for trees and you can't find anything that's a decent size, say bigger than 6 inches diameter, we still can set cameras up on smaller trees, but because they're so prone to being blown around in the wind, they're essentially just a big sail. If you use a smaller tree, it's important that you top it so that it can't blow around, and then you can install the camera on sort of the fence post you create. Okay, so here is our tree. And this guy happens to have no low branches hanging down below it, but if it did, what I would do with my handy hatchet or handsaw or whatever tool you prefer, is I would go ahead and clear any low branches on here that could wave around and get in the way of our future camera location, which is going to go about right here. Additionally, there's some shrubs beside this tree, which in windy conditions or under snow loading, they might bend down in front to where this camera location will be set up at, looking this way. And again, I'm going to duck down. You can see there's a bit of shrubs here, about 1 meter high, in front of the camera spot. So I'm going to basically mow a small lawn in front of the camera up to the trail location, which is just up here and running up along here. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this vegetation in front. If there were branches on the tree, I would generously clear them, including well above the camera height in case they get loaded with snow or in a big windstorm. So I would clear all those away, and now I'm going to clear some of this vegetation here, and then I'll show you what it looks like after. Okay, so I've gone ahead and mowed down most of the area around the front of this tree, which just below the blue object on the tree there, if you can see, I'm going to be setting the camera up about 1 meter high. And so there's no longer a bunch of debris in front of where the camera will be looking, which is directly at us right now. And I've gone ahead and cleared a couple of the shrubs off on the side of the tree so that even in a windy situation, we're not going to have anything waving in front over to about here where our camera is going to be and blocking the images or causing false triggers. So we've gone ahead and really kind of cleaned this area up. There's not a whole lot in front. There are some grasses, and I've done my best to kind of mow those down somewhat. But a little bit of grass is okay. We just don't want kind of large shrubs that will be standing sort of in front of the camera and wavering around, causing a ton of false triggers. And what I've done is I've cleared pretty much everything up to the trail. Shrubs on the back side of the trail, I haven't worried too much about. If there's something that looks like it's going to wave around a lot, I might clear it, but once you get far enough away from the camera, you shouldn't be dealing with a lot of false triggers. I'm going to go ahead and show you a little bit about mounting the camera. And what I'm shooting for is a height of about 1 meter. So off of the ground here, 1 meter brings us to right here. If you're in sloping terrain, and actually this is a slight slope in front of me here, sloping upwards, it's okay to change the height of the camera. Generally, you're going to want to, if the ground slopes up in front of you, you're going to want to raise your camera height. So that's effectively 1 meter above the actual trail that you're targeting. And given the choice to set your camera up above or below a trail on sloping ground, it's generally best practice to set up your camera on the downhill side, higher up, looking at the trail instead of going onto the higher side and looking down. Let's go ahead and mount this camera. So most of our cameras have these webbing straps to initially secure the camera to the tree. I'll do that in a moment here. But our old Reconyx cameras, which are gray camouflage, they're not compatible with webbing. And so I've gone ahead and created a bunch of black screw-in mounts, which can be used for those cameras. And the reason I specified the black color is because I also created several brown screw-in mounts, and they're slightly different. They're same design but longer components on the brown screw-in mounts, which is better suited to screw into a tree. And now you have an up-down pivoting platform that screws into the bottom of Bushnell cameras and new Reconyx cameras, so it will sit standing up out from the tree, and that works well with the longer components on the brown screw-in mount. But for the black one, old Reconyx Hyperfire cameras, their screw-in mount is directly on the back of the camera, not the bottom, so it doesn't work to try to screw them upright. They need to be fastened from the back. And so for the black screw-in mounts with shorter components, they will sit tighter to the tree. So they won't work really well for doing the up-down style securing of the Bushnells or new Reconyx cameras. They're better for snugging up to the tree and then screwing the camera into the front. And now this is a side-to-side pivoting platform instead of up-down. The key thing to remember, if you're setting up a old Reconyx Hyperfire camera, each one will be equipped with one of these black screw-in mounts. Those are specifically for those cameras. The brown ones can work with essentially any camera and are better used from the bottom. Okay. Just to go over real quick how these screw-in mounts work to actually fasten the camera on. So you hand screw this into a tree, and then once it's nice and sturdy, you simply screw the tripod mount on the bottom into your camera. But you don't need to go ahead and wrench this with all the strength you have. In fact, once it comes to it, you can feel when it stops, there's no thread left. Don't push any harder. That's why there's these upside down wing nuts on on the camera mounting platforms so that you can screw those back and tighten the camera in place nice and snug so that it won't spin. And so that's the basic way to secure the camera after the actual mount's in place. And the final piece would be going ahead and tightening this large wing nut really tight so that nothing's gonna bump this and tilt the camera's position. So I'm gonna go ahead and strap this onto the tree, and then I'll talk a little bit about a few important steps for setting up the camera. So now that the camera is roughly in position, we want to make sure that the view shed of the camera is capturing what we want. And so we're going to actually want to be catching the ground of the trail in front of this camera up to the height of our animals. So typically this actually requires tilting the cameras slightly downwards. And you can do this by breaking off short chunks of woody debris, ideally not super rotten, that's just going to kind of crumble underneath there, but a couple robust pieces of short sticks. You don't want them really long and sticking out from the camera, because that's just something for an elk or a bear to come along and grab, and that'll mess up the camera orientation. So you'll grab a couple things like this guy and just sort of wedge them in place behind the camera, tighten the strap, and sort of get it to sit how you want it so that it's about 1 meter high in flat ground territory, and slightly angled downwards. Okay, and then after you have that, we're going to want to make sure that we actually are kind of seeing what we think we're seeing, and so we're going to do a walk test. And a walk test is a function in trail cameras that allows you to effectively see what the camera can see. And you turn on this mode and it will flash a red light on the front of the camera every time that it detects a motion event, which is convenient for you to see where the effective viewscape of this camera is. Okay, so I've turned the walk test mode on this Bushnell camera, and you can see this red light flashing every time that it detects motion. To turn the walk test mode on your camera, if it's a Bushnell, you have to open it up and then flick the toggle inside. There's an on-off toggle, and there's a middle setting called setup. By flicking it to setup, that turns your walk test on. Then you can simply close the camera, and it will blink a red light every time it detects motion. For the Reconyx cameras, you'll have to enter a passcode, which is 1423. And then it should be the second option in the menu. I believe scrolling to the right will get you walk test. You just hit enter on walk test, and that will turn walk test mode on the Reconyx cameras. So with walk test turned on, we want to actually measure the length of the detection zone, or the length of the trail through the detection zone. So this means going out to our trail from where our camera is now, walking along the trail to the far edges on either side where the red light will flash and then flash no more. Once we find those spots, we'll scuff the ground and then measure the actual length of trail that runs through the detection zone for this camera. We're walking along the trail. Oh, I see a flash. I'm gonna back up, move. Okay, so that camera is flashing. So then I walk over here to the far side, and I start coming in. And okay, I get a flash there. Just gonna double check to see if I get one further back. Okay, flash here. Okay, so I essentially am roughly figuring out where the edges of the detection area are. I then scuff the ground or do whatever I need to do, stick a stick in there, move over to the other location just over there where the far side was. Then I'm gonna go grab my handy measuring tape and simply measure that distance along the trail here. So I'm just gonna go over to the far side where I first saw the red flashing light on the camera, and measure from there over to here where I scuffed the ground, and it should be, usually it's over 3 meters. If you get a really narrow detection zone, you might want to consider shifting your camera's position. If we're working with Bushnell cameras, it's exceedingly important that we remember to flick the camera on now. If you leave it in walk test in setup mode on Bushnells, it will stay that way and the battery will die and we'll get 0 photos. So we need to crack it open and flick the toggle from setup. You can flick it off and then all the way back to on. That will arm the camera, and then it will be good to go for taking wildlife photos. For the Reconyx models cameras, it's less important because if you just leave the walk test on, after 2 minutes of no detections, the camera will automatically arm itself. But sometimes it's nice to give yourself the peace of mind to go into the camera and select arm, just so you can know that it's taking photos. And that's important for a second reason. Before we leave the site, we need to actually take a photo with this camera. Just wanted to show a demonstration of what I mean. So I've written the information here. My camera ID is on the top, camera SG54. The site was 2590.1. The 0.1 refers to that was the first coordinate that I went to. And I didn't have to try the alternative coordinates, but you might have to go to 0.2 or 3. The date that camera was set up was August 6th, and I set it up at 10:55 a.m. I always write military time, so I don't need to worry about AM, PM, but make sure to specify. This camera is on. I hold this right up in front and make sure that I get a good, clear picture of that information. Every camera has a unique ID. Our new Reconyx models are SG1 through 75, and that's on a sticker on the inside. Our older Reconyx cameras are UBCO 1 through 75, and that's written with a Sharpie on the inside top of the cameras. And then our Bushnell road cameras are their numbers are mixed up, but they're all sort of low 20s to 45 or so. And those numbers are written in black Sharpie on the cameras, D something. Unfortunately, they have a secondary number on some of the cameras in silver. So please make sure if you're working with a Bushnell camera, you're recording the D number. Once our camera is on, we're happy with the walk test, it's in position, we need to secure it with a Python lock, which are included in the camera kits. There's a couple of site photos I'll walk you through here in a second. And then we're almost ready to go. There's just a handful of things we need to make sure we do before we leave. So I've gone ahead and attached my Python lock here, so this camera is secured and armed and in place. Now I need to set up a reference post, which I'm gonna do on the far side of the trail within the camera's view shed. This is to help give us reference for the size of things moving by, but also to track growth of vegetation and a number of things. And it's also going to be useful when we retrieve our cameras. These guys will stay, and that'll help us make sure that we center the camera back on the same image, which will be easier, particularly in environments that don't have a lot of trees around as landmarks. This is a landmark that we can kind of make sure we're looking at the same landscape when we reset the cameras up. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this up. The last few steps remaining are to take some photos. I'll stand within my target area on the trail, and I'll take a north, east, south, and west cardinal direction photo, just to give me reference photos for what this site is like. And if those photos don't capture a photo of the actual camera setup, I'll take an extra photo, making sure that I see what the actual setup looks like. In case something bumps it and changes it, we can see that it's been modified when we come back. We don't want this blocking the trail. Instead, we want this to sort of be visible, but not blocking animals moving through the area. And then we're going to once it's secure in the ground, we're gonna make some marks on here with a felt marker. Every 20 centimeters, we'll make a big, thick, fat line and draw a number. 1, the next 20 centimeters, big, fat line. 2, 3, and that way, if this thing's partially obscured, but we can see the number 3 above some vegetation, we know it's 60 centimeters tall. And I know that the ground's not the same everywhere, so I didn't pre-mark these, just so that you can hammer it to whatever depth it needs to be stable in the ground. That would pretty much wrap it up. Then we would go ahead and throw some orange flagging on a tree about 20 feet behind the camera, double band of orange flagging. That's to give people who are trying to find the camera a reference that is approximately 20 feet or so from the camera's location. If it's a heavily forested area, like maybe the one I'm in now, which has got a fair bit of shrubs and stuff, feel free to put up a couple of extra bands, single bands on trees or hanging from branches in the area around. You don't want ribbons in the camera view shed, but you know, whatever you have to do to make this site relocatable. So let's go ahead and install this post. Okay, so we have our camera in position, Python lock is on, and I've gone ahead and installed a reference post in the camera's view shed with increments of height labeled on here with thick bands and numbers. So every number corresponds to 20 centimeters, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Now the posts that I've been providing are a little bit wider than this, and you'll have a easier time making out the numbers back from the camera site on the wider post, but I'm down in Idaho at the moment, and so I'm working with what I got. But the next thing we do, we have the camera locked in place, we've done our walk test, and we've recorded the measurement. Now I'm going to find the trail, which is right here in front of the stake. So the reference stake goes on the other side of the trail. I look at my compass, find north, which is right, as I was saying, is almost right as the way that our camera is oriented. Now, if you imagine that this video is what my camera can see, click, that's my north photo. I then look east, click, turn to south, click, and this happens to capture my camera setup, so I won't need to take a separate photo for that, and west, click. Now I have 4 photos that describe what this site looks like. Now I need to go behind this camera to put some flagging up on a tree 20 feet behind. I see a good candidate right there. And install some ribbon around here and just finish the last few steps of my data sheet. Okay, so there's several measurements that we're going to ask you to fill in to complete your data sheet. And some of that is also just recording notes about the site. For instance, from earlier today, we've already entered our parking coordinates so that we can find our way back at the end of the day, but we also want to make sure that this location is tagged in our GPS and written on the data form. Additionally, we're going to want measurements for the distance of the trail camera to our reference post, the height of the reference post, the height to the bottom of our camera, the bearing which our camera is directed at. Make some notes about the site, like the amount of canopy cover over the detection area. In this forest here, it's quite open, so it's probably not even, well, it's probably around 35%, which is actually a little bit higher than several of our sites. A lot of them are sort of in the 0 to 25% range. We also want you to write down the difficulty and distance for hiking into a site as well as driving. In case you're not going back out to this camera, we have an idea of what people might be getting themselves into. Some of these cameras are in very remote locations. We're interested if you saw a sign of deer or wildlife around, and there's a spot on the form to record if you see scat or pellets or what you do happen to observe. And as well, there's a section that asks, does the site match target coordinates or the target habitat? And not every camera is connected with a target habitat, but we do have some cameras which we specifically want to fall inside of a young burn or a young cut block or a middle-aged burn and so forth. And so that information of what the target habitat is will be sent out along with the coordinates for your deployment site and the alternative coordinates. So you'll know when you're going out to a site that the target is for this location to be within a burn. And you can just make notes. What might have been a 60-year-old fire, there wasn't a whole lot of evidence of disturbance, but I saw some fire-scarred veteran trees, which supports the idea that the old burn target is at least somewhat accurate. Okay, so once you finish your data sheet, have a quick look over, make sure you've taken all the photos you need to take, that you have turned the camera on, that you've locked it to the tree, and that the camera is firmly in place, that you can't bump it and it just totally shifts. You want it snug. You want to take the key out of the Python lock and take that with you. And then you just want to make sure that, like I said before, we'll go ahead and throw up some flagging around here, a double band of orange ribbon on the tree about 20 feet behind here. I don't think I need to demonstrate this, but the point is you'd put one band and a second band, and if you want to get fancy, you can even have the knots pointing towards where the camera is. That would be awesome. But that's just a way to help us find our sites. And so put up as much ribbon as you feel is necessary, but we also don't want it to be painfully obvious where our cameras are. So that is essentially everything. Before you pack up, I would just make sure you have all your things with you. It's easy to lose stuff when you're out in the woods unless it's bright orange and colorful. I recommend putting strings on almost everything you have, and even ribbon on pencils and things like that, just so you don't lose them. And once you have all your photos, your data form is completed, you've taken a photo of the front and back of your completed data form, and you've taken a photo of a blank piece of paper, which are in the camera kits, that you've written on a Sharpie with, that has the grid ID, so the site name, the date and time that the camera was turned on at, and the camera's ID. When you have that information on a piece of paper, your armed camera, you'll put it right in front. Make sure that you capture some photos of that information so that it's in the memory card of that camera in case we happen to mix them up. And you can be sure that it took a photo once it's on, once the camera's on, by opening it up, and then it will tell you while it's on and taking photos, the screen will be telling you it's in the middle of taking photo 2 of 3. These cameras are set to take 3 photo bursts, and so you'll know that there's photos on it. Another way is to open it, and perhaps you flick it on and off. When it first turns on, it will tell you how many photos are on it. Okay, so you've finished at your site and you've actually already gone home. So really I should be filming this in my house because that's where you'll be when you're having these thoughts. Your day's over, you set up your camera. The only thing that's left to do is to share that information with me, and also let your safety contact know that you're back home safe. And so you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone by emailing me a photo, well actually all the photos you took that day, the northeast southwest photos from the target area, the photo of the camera setup, as well as the 2 front and back pictures of your complete data sheet. That gives me the coordinates I need to keep track of all the camera locations. It also lets me know that you're done and safely home, and I don't need to worry about contacting anybody because you made it back home. I understand that we have long, busy days, and sometimes people don't get around to sending this out the exact day of. That's best scenario to do that, to actually send it out the day of. But if you do delay, do not delay long. It creates a long trail of work for me to have to hunt people down. I don't want to have to do that. You don't want me to have to hunt you down. So just please, if you go through all the effort of setting up a camera, go through the extra little bit of passing the information along, and the whole process will go so much more smoothly. Okay, so that essentially sums up our camera setup. That's essentially the full process for deploying our Southern Interior Mule Deer Project camera. By following these steps, you're gonna help us collect some really good, accurate data, and it's gonna give us a really important look at where our mule deer are, what they're doing, and what's affecting them out in the woods. So thanks a lot for your time, for watching this video, and for your patience, and have fun getting out there and hiking. Please let me know if you have any questions or contact your regional rep.